Hey, what's up, boxers? This is Zack with Buildbox. In this video series, I'm going to walk you through the process of making a complete game. The game that we're going to be making is this Geometry Dash inspired game that I made and I passed out in another video you may have seen earlier. And let me go ahead and just show you a quick preview of what this game is going to look like. So you have a little cube character who does a little spin jump and has a jump limit of 2, and then you've got some enemies and some obstacles and some decorations there in the background. We're probably going to skip the decorations because I'm not too crazy about those, but I threw them in there in the original game and I'm just going to show you these right now. But let's go ahead, let's exit out of this game and let's jump into it, and I'm going to show you how to make this game from scratch. Alright, so this is the Buildbox welcome window. So we have all the different templates that you can choose from with Buildbox. You don't have to choose any of these templates. You can simply go with the default template and start with a blank slate. But if you'd like to use one of the templates, you can. We also have latest news and articles from the Buildbox blog. Our staff writer, Tiana Crump, has different articles down here that you can read. I definitely recommend checking those out at some point. And then also, I highly recommend going through these templates and testing these out as well and getting a quick idea of what the gameplay is like. If you want, you can take your mouse and you can hover over the different templates and you can get a quick preview of what the gameplay is going to look like before opening the template. You also have recent documents over here on the right, and let's go ahead and let's just jump into it now. I'm going to select the default template as a starter point, and then we're going to jump into it. So we've got our game mind map here. This is where our game starts, and then it goes into our 3D world, and we'll work on this here in a little bit. We're going to add to this. But for right now, I want to just jump into our 3D world by double clicking on the 3D world, and let's take a look at it here. So we've got this orange cube on a purple platform, and I don't want to use either one of these. I want to just start off with a completely blank slate. So I'm going to click the little X over here on the objects menu, hovering over the little thumbnail, and I'm going to delete these different objects. So I just deleted both those objects. So right now we have absolutely nothing set up yet. And so now let's go ahead and let's add in a few things. So the first thing I want to add is some ground. So I'm going to select my little asset library here. This is going to open it up, and then I'm going to double click on a cube, and that is going to be the ground for me. And I think I'm also going to double click on another cube, and I'm going to use the cube as the character. If you don't want to double click on an image, then you can just click add to library, and that will also work. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click out of my asset library now, and I'm going to take one of the cubes and I'm going to drag it up into my characters menu, and it's going to immediately become an actor, and it's going to rename the cube actor. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this main character. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we've got the main character now, and I'm going to go ahead and just call this the ground. So ground. And we'll also need another cube or maybe a plane for the background as well. But let's go ahead and just drag out our ground real fast. I'm going to use the scale tool up here in the upper left hand corner, and I'm going to grab this little guy and this green one, and I'm going to flatten it out a little bit and scale it down in the Y direction. So I'm going to make it smaller. Okay, perfect. So that looks pretty good. I'll make it pretty thin. It doesn't really matter how thick you make it, but let's go ahead. Let's also stretch it out to the width of the scene. So you can see that this scene has a little starter point right here. This is the start of your scene. This is the end of your scene, and it's symbolized by a little cube here for the beginning and a little pyramidal object here at the end to mark the end of the scene. So let's go ahead now. Let's drag this out. Let's flatten this out a little bit. Looking pretty good. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to drag my main character on here as well. But first, let's change the color of the ground, because both the character and the ground are both white, and so that's not going to work. When you go with a ground color or something like that, you could go with like, a green to make it sort of grassy, but you mostly want to go with like muted colors. So I'm going to go with something like this, kind of a little bit of a more muted green, and then I'm going to take the take the coloring down and make it a little bit darker. So I'm not going to use the same colors as the Geometry Dash template I made before. I'm going to try something completely different and unique. I'm going to build that here with you guys, and then we'll keep going. So now let's go ahead and drag out our main character, and that looks good. I'm going to position it upwards a little bit so we can get an idea of how big it is. And when you make your characters, one mistake that I see a lot of new game developers make is they make their characters just too big. And now that I look at the Geometry Dash template that I made earlier, and I'm looking at it in reflection, I think I made the same mistake that a lot of new game developers made, and I think I made the character just too big. So it's always better to err on the side of caution and it's probably better to go a little bit smaller than a little bit too big in the end. So I think 0.2 looks okay. Maybe you can even go a little bit smaller, but that looks all right. Okay, so we've got this cube, and that's our character, and we've got the ground. Now I'm going to move it a little bit backwards just so that we have some space to move forward. And you know what, let's go ahead and let's create another scene, a duplicate scene. So I'm going to select my start scene, and I'm going to hit D on my keyboard and duplicate the scene. Okay, and so D is for duplicate. But what happens is when you duplicate a start scene and you've got the character already in there, it's going to duplicate the scene with the character as well. And you don't actually want that. You don't want to have multiple characters starting in multiple scenes, unless that's the design of your game. But for this case, that's not what we want. So I'm going to go into that first scene. I'm just going to delete that that character, or the copy of that character. And then here's our character in the start scene, and that's what we want. So let's go ahead, let's give the character a little bit of a different color as well. I'm thinking I might go with kind of like a red or pinkish color, something like this. Let's go ahead and let's see what that looks like. Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Red and green are Christmas colors, and tis the season, so why not go with it? All right, awesome. So right now though, all we've got is a stationary ground and a stationary character. They're not doing anything yet. So let's go ahead, let's give these things some physics. Let's spice it up a little bit here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on my ground, and I'm going to go into my ground's node map. And now right now it's pretty bare bones. It's just got a start node, and it's got a 3D model, and this is the cube, this is the mesh that we resized in our scene. So what I want to do though is I want to select my start node and select physics, because I do want the cube to be able to jump and land on the ground. And so what I want it to do is I want it to have a collision shape, I want it to have physics, but I don't want it to adhere to the laws of gravity. So what I want to do is I want to change the object type to static. And what this does is it makes it so that the gravity doesn't affect this ground. The ground is just going to stay there. It's going to be static. So now it's going to go ahead and I'm going to exit out of my ground node map here. I'm going to go back to my 3D world, and I'm going to go into my main character's node map as well. So let's go ahead and let's also give the main character some physics too. Let's go ahead and select the little physics option here. And what I want to do is I want to make this object type dynamic, because I do want gravity to affect this. And so I want it to land on the ground. And so let's go ahead and I'll show you that right now. I'm going to go back to my 3D world, and I'm just going to lift this up a little bit. And let's make sure that the camera can even see this, because we haven't adjusted our camera at all. But you know what, I'm just going to test it out and we'll see. Okay, cool. Heck, the camera was already on it, so that's pretty convenient. And you can see that the cube just fell from the sky and kind of landed on the ground. I'm going to go ahead and resize this a little bit so that it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to go with an iPhone 4, and there's all these different sizes that you can choose from: iPhone 5, iPhone 4, iPad, Full HD, and iPhone X. And there's going to be more screen sizes added eventually, and so you can test it out and see what it's going to look like on different size screens in different size devices. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to exit out of the preview right now. I'm going to just kind of show you the effects of gravity. I'm going to just really slightly, I'm going to use this rotation tool, and I'm going to slightly rotate it like this. And so I want you to see what that looks like in real time. So let's preview it, and you can see that the cube fell and then it landed on its edge and then plopped over and moved a little bit to the left. So that's great. But one thing that we don't really want to do is we want this cube moving straight forward. And so I actually don't want the cube moving too much to the left. So I'm going to try this out right now. I'm going to change the position factor on this main character. So I'm going to exit out of my preview. I'm going to go to my main character. I'm going to change this position factor, and what this does is it allows the character, or allows the object that you're working with, it allows it to move left or right, up or down, or front and back, depending on which axis you're looking at. So right now, I believe it just moved a little bit to the left, and so I want to change the position factor to 0 in the X direction so that it's not moving to the left when it lands on the ground. I want it to stay centered, and so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make it so that it stays centered. So I'm going to press preview again, and you see how it just fell straight down. It didn't do that move where it moved to the left. Okay, I'm going to change the position factor again to 1 so you can see the difference real fast. So I'm going to refresh the preview and check out how the cube, when it lands, it moves a little bit to the left. It's a little bit more natural, and it's what you would expect from a real physics object in a real world. But I want you to see the difference. Okay, you see how it moved a little bit to the left there. All right, so now let's change the position factor back to 0, and we'll see that it goes just straight down. So let's refresh the preview, and then boom, straight down. And that's what we want for this, because in this game, our character is only going to be moving straight down this path, and it's also going to be moving up and down for the jumping. All right, Boxers, that's it for this video. Keep an eye out for part 2 coming soon on how to build your own video game.